Vietnam is located in Southeast Asia and has long been influenced by its two giant neighbors, India and China. However, Vietnam also had its own indigenous culture and civil practices, and as such, the interweaving of this with the influences from her neighbors created a rich culture wherein Buddhism took an important position due to its very practical, lively, and humanistic philosophy. Because of such characteristics, Buddhism easily entered into the native culture, thereby forming an important aspect of the Vietnamese worldview. Vietnam is a multiracial country and so is multicultural. We learn that the Buddhist culture entered into the nation during the reign of King Hung. The first Buddhist was recorded as being Chu Dong Tu, while Phat Quang is said to have been the first Buddhist missionary. There still stands a pagoda that is connected with the era of King Hung, known as the Tay Tien Pagoda. It is located in the mountainous Tam Dao region, which is also known as the cradle of Vietnamese Buddhism. For over 2,000 years, Buddhism has been tied to most historical currents that have flowed through Vietnam's ruling dynasty. Today also, Buddhism progresses forward and has huge support from the citizens. It also has the largest religion in Vietnam, with more than 70% of the population as supporters, which is roughly 15 million people, not counting those who are non-committed but sympathetic. Before the advent of Buddhism in ancient Vietnam, there was nature religion that venerated the female creative energy. This consisted of 3 female deities who were said to have created the natural environment: the sky, the ground, and the ocean. When the Buddhist teachings arrived, they widely rooted themselves into this form of animism, which created a strong relationship between Buddhism and the native culture. Since this period of antiquity, numerous monasteries and temples were constructed. They are in general termed pagodas. Vietnamese pagodas are not only for religious practice, but also a fulcrum of Vietnamese ethical and cultural education. Indeed, a great deal of spiritual talent has emanated from these pagodas over the centuries. Over its long history, Vietnamese Buddhism has shown itself to be concerned with the well-being of the common people and their learning of national culture. The Buddhist community of male and female monks has worked to protect the nation through the various historical periods, and this has always been considered to be typical. The integrated nature of Buddhism's relation with the country inspired poet Not True to write the following verse: Vietnam and Buddhism, Buddhism and Vietnam, 1,000 years of bonding flesh and bone, oceans and rivers of affection shown. The curly roof of the temple, an ancient stupa, the gentle sound of a bell, they harmonize with the traditional compassion of the people who create a happy and peaceful life, which says that the national spirit lives in harmony with the spirit of Buddhism. The humanistic views of liberty and morality found in Buddhism arrived in Vietnam early in the 2nd century BC, coming from India. According to historians, Buddhism came to Vietnam over 3 main routes. The first route had Indian Buddhist monks traveling on Indian ships to Vietnam. Often these ships originated from countries in the south of India. In this period, Giao Chao was the place where Indian vendors traded in want of aromatic oils and precious woods. They would station themselves in Giao Chao for a season, waiting for the north winds in order to sail back to India. In such journeys, they often carried along images of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to pray for safety and luck. In this way, Indian Buddhist culture was transported and received by the Vietnamese. The second route that Buddhism took to Vietnam was by means of land routes into the area of Assam, Upper Burma, then into the Yunnan region and over to the region of Vietnam to Lao Cai, Yen Bai, then to Hanoi and Haiphong. The Indian merchants and Buddhist monks, along with developing trade and interrelationships, also carried their religion and culture, influencing all of the places that they traveled to. Along with the monks who traveled on ships, these were the first to propagate Buddhism in Vietnam, and this is at a very early date. The third route was dominated by Chinese monks traveling into Giao Chao by roads directly from South China. Due to the initial activities of Buddhist propagation by eminent Indian monks at Loi Lao, it early on became the largest center of Buddhist culture in the region. From the 2nd century of the current era, Jiao Buddhism steadily developed. Indian monks started translating Buddhist texts like the Six Paramitas Sutra. The Sutra of Examples, for example, was widely circulated due to its popularity. These sutras became part of Vietnamese Buddhist cultural life. The appearance of the famous book, Argument or Discussion, by Mao Zi, engaged in dialogues with Confucianists and thereby gained trust and respect from intellectuals. This book became a guideline for Buddhist dialogue and made Gyao known to many countries in the region. During this period, Buddhism developed both the philosophical and popular levels. It was in this period that the lineages of Vietnamese monks gradually formed. It was in the 6th century that the Chinese Zen schools arrived in Vietnam. Moreover, missionary delegations started arriving in Vietnam around 580. With this, many other Zen sects arrived, one by one, in Vietnam. This resulted in the growth of the popularity of Buddhism in Vietnam. As time progressed, Vietnamese Buddhism produced its own Zen masters, some of whom were invited to teach in Tang Dynasty China. It was during this period that Vietnamese Buddhism gave its hands to the development and protection of national culture, as many monks maintained, in their religious missions, the spirit of independence. Vietnamese Buddhism captured the faith of the people and so the desire for an independent nation. This meant that the role of Buddhism was to be involved with nation building, and it went on to resist and defeat the Chinese control of the region. The people of Jiao accepted the Dharma practices from early centuries. There were the Zen schools, the Pure Land schools, and the Tantric schools. But the most popular were the Zen schools. But it was not until the coming of Vinitaruchi to Vietnam in 580 that the Zen school was understood to have been fully transferred. The Zen propagation of Vinitaruchi both engaged society while working for the attainment of awakening. This Zen school, characteristic of Vietnamese Zen, was based on the control of thoughts with the Kong'an. Enlightenment or becoming Buddha is a sequence of the mind seal transmission. This Zen school was maintained for approximately 600 years, transferred through 19 generations. It also formed teams of intellectuals to work in the struggle of regaining independence from China. Around the 9th century, another meditation school from China, named Wuyang Tong, arrived in Vietnam. The idea of this Zen school helped in increasing the sense of national independence. Many famous Zen masters of this school appeared and together took the responsibility to free the country from Chinese control. Not until 1069, during the dynasty of King Li Tan Tong, was a third Zen school imported into Vietnam. This was the Tao Duong school. The Chinese Zen master Cao Dang came to the region and propagated Buddhism. He then settled here. His teachings appealed only to mandarins, royalty, and nobility, rather than to the average person. So, Taodong Zen School offered a form of meditation and intellectualism that appealed primarily to those in government. It was after the victory over the Mongol invasion in the 13th century in the north and the pacification of the Champa in the south that King Tran Nan Tong chose to work with Buddhism to rebuild the society. It is said that he was acutely aware of the Buddhist teachings on compassion and salvation. At a later period, he then passed his throne to his son in order to become a wandering mountain monk and settled at Yentu Mountain in Quang Ninh Province for deep practice. It was here that he founded the Truc Lam Zen School, a fully Vietnamese school with the policy, stay with society and find happiness with the Dharma. This socially oriented, engagement with life philosophical trend profoundly influenced the further development of Vietnamese Buddhism, while also impacting the activities of the average person. It also brought prosperity to the country. The Truc Lam Zen School actively engaged society, bringing in the philosophy of the 5 precepts and the 10 ethical codes to educate people and help stabilize society. Thus, the government leaders in the Tran dynasty built up a policy which was friendly to the people and raised Vietnamese Buddhism to the peak of an enlightened spirit. In terms of its philosophical outlook, organization, and Dharma practice, the Truc Lam Zen School became the main advocate of Vietnamese Buddhism, supporting the people and maintaining culture. Today, Truc Lam Zen is a cultural relic that represents the core spiritual values of Vietnam. Many people believe that when practicing Buddhism, one has to chant the Buddha's name or be a vegetarian. That's all right. However, the Truc Lam Zen School does not emphasize on these points. That is considered the ultimate way of practice. The main purpose of practice in Truc Lam Zen is to serve the people and to bring the benefits to all beings.
Không nên câu nệ, mà mục đích cuối cùng vẫn là lợi ích cho đạo pháp, lợi ích cho dân tộc, lợi ích cho chúng sinh.
The Pure Land School is very popular in Vietnam. Currently, the number of Pure Land monasteries in Vietnam are numerous. Originally, the Pure Land School was introduced by the Chinese monk Bhikkhu Hui Vien. Pure Land practice consists of reciting the Buddha Amitabha's name in order to gain an undisturbed, unified mind. This includes supplications to Amitabha and contemplation of Amitabha's Pure Land, as explained in the Amitabha Sutra. The combination of Zen and Pure Land practices is popular in Vietnamese Buddhism. Certain practices of the Tantric sect share similar points with the Zen school that directly sense the mind. They use Zen koans and esoteric expressions to open the mind to enlightenment. This is on top of the normal tantric uses of mantra and deity visualizations. Tantrism entered Vietnam in the Tran Nan Tong dynasty through a tantric monk named Du Chi Ban Lam. This was at the same time as Zen. Tantrism in Vietnam did not develop very far, and hence there are not so many followers today. It was in the 10th century that Vietnam gained its independence from China. This sparked a renaissance of Vietnamese culture. Understandably, the primary cultural characteristic of this period, from the 10th century to the 14th century, is a highly national spirit integrated with Buddhist characteristics. As such, Buddhism was considerably engaged in national affairs. Important monks participated in the country's administration, working to maintain Vietnam's newly gained independence. At different times, different monks were consulted by the king in the planning of national policy, as per the needs of the country. It was not uncommon for outstanding monk advisors to be given high titles. For example, in the Tianle dynasty, Zen masters were often made advisors. Two famous examples were the Zen masters Pap Tuan and Van Han. They played key roles in building the Li dynasty while influencing this intelligent king Li Kongyuan to put an end to the violence of the previous king. In this period of Vietnamese history, there was basically no boundary between social or monastic life. These Buddhist monks developed strategies for creating and protecting national prosperity and sovereignty. When King Lai Tai To took the throne, he quickly stabilized society and the people gained prosperity. Much of his success was connected to his Buddhist education. Of interest is that he also built many monasteries under the slogan, "Pagoda roofs cover the people's spirit." The fact that various kings built monasteries reflects that the Buddhist monasteries were very important centers of education for Vietnam in the pre-modern history. The specific characteristic of Vietnamese Buddhism during the Li dynasty was that of integration of Buddhism and government. This condominium maintained sovereignty, prosperity, and relationships with laity and the Sangha to deal with important national problems, particularly when the country was under attack. Vietnamese Buddhism acquired these specific characteristics because many of its royalty were Buddhist and they supported the Dharma. They also used the spirit of Buddhism as a guideline for cultural, social, and political activities. In 1428, King Li Loi took the throne and gained full independence from China. Buddhism also retained its place in the cultural life of the people with its various monastery-based activities in the kingdom. Consequently, the Hao Le dynasty saw many important Buddhists. For example, the householder Yuan Trai took the Buddhist concepts of equanimity and righteousness directly into the military, while the lay mathematician Luong Te Vinh strongly impacted Vietnamese education. The development of various Buddhist schools proceeded and hundreds of pagodas and monasteries renovated. Taken together, this reflects the unique Buddhist scenario of the Lê dynasty. At the fall of the Mac dynasty, a civil war broke out between two main factions, the Trinh and the Nguyen. At this time, the Buddhist Sangha also split, influenced by the war. This division of the Sangha was termed Dang Noi, or outer side, and Dang Trong, or inner side. Both sides had different activities and behaviors. The Dang Noi kept the traditions of the people, and well-known Zen masters were still used by government. On the other hand, the Dang Trong was formed following the trend of pushing Vietnam's borders further southward. The head of the Nguyen fashion, Lord Nguyen, also admired Buddhism and built Linh Mu Monastery, thereby initializing the growth of Buddhism in the middle of Vietnam. During this period, Chinese Zen masters brought along new Dharma practice, the most significant being the Linji and Chaodong Zen schools. The following dynasties continued their support of Buddhism. For example, monasteries and pagodas were everywhere permitted to construct and renovate. Buddhism worked for the prosperity and protection of the nation until the advent of the European colonists. Buddhism was established in the Hongbong dynasty. From this period, Buddhism continued to develop, especially from the Lai Nam De dynasty through to the Lai Tang Tong dynasty. Buddhism supported the fight for independence from China. From Li Tang Tong dynasty in 1069, Buddhism consisted of three schools, Zen, Pure Land, and Tantra.
Mình biết cái Phật giáo xưa nay cho đến cái thời điểm của Lý Thánh Tông
Phật giáo chủ yếu là để dành cho hàng xuất gia. Nhưng từ Lý Thánh Tông và Phái Thiền Đạo Đường trở đi thì Phật giáo, những người giác ngộ không chỉ những người xuất gia mà cả những người tại gia. Và những người tại gia này là những người quan chức, tiếp nối cho đến cái nền Phật giáo của Thảo Đường này thì Trần Nhân Tông do yêu cầu của đất nước bây giờ phải phát triển như thế nào như thế, cho nên đã đưa ra cái khẩu hiệu cứ trần lạc đạo. Thì đấy là một dạng Phật giáo gọi là tân thế của Thảo Đường thôi. Nhưng mình nhấn mạnh có lẽ Phật giáo Thảo Đường là trong cái bảng danh sách của Phật giáo này thì thấy toàn bộ là quan chức. Cho nên thời Trần Nhân Tông thì đã đưa Phật giáo này không những có quan chức mà của toàn dân. Đấy là điểm đặc biệt trong và chính văn bản ghi nhận rõ ràng là Trần Nhân Tông đã đi thuyết giảng thập thiện cho tất cả các làng mạc Việt Nam. Và có những người ta nói rằng là Phật giáo đã đi vào làng mạc Việt Nam, chùa làng Việt Nam có lẽ xuất hiện vào thời nào. Sau khi mà chúng ta hoàn thành cuộc Nam Tiến rồi, 1698 thành lập thành phố Sài Gòn rồi, thì lúc bấy giờ Phật giáo mang một sắc thái mới. Đây là không những vui ở đời vui đạo, bây giờ là chúng ta nắm lấy nho giáo, tức là khoa học lý xã hội, và chúng ta
this
vẫn Phật
idea
giáo.
was further
Cho nên cái giai đoạn
developed to
này,
the point that they saw the laity,
người vừa học nho vừa là Phật
including
giáo,
all classes
chúng ta
of
có những tiến sĩ
society,
mà vừa được
as
xưng
having
là
their dharma
thiền sư,
practice in
trường
the
hợp cụ
service
thể
to society.
là như Ngô Thị Nhiệm
Of
chẳng hạn.
interest was that King Tran
Ngô
Nam
Thị Nhiệm
Tong
đã
regularly
nói
preached
rằng
Dharma to the
là ông
public.
là binh bộ thượng thư, nhưng mà vừa là Hải Lượng đại thiền sư. Đấy, cho nên mình sẽ thấy đây là những cái và sau này những phong trào Phật giáo trong thời Kháng Pháp thì mình sẽ thấy những gọi là nhà nho, nhưng đây là những Phật giáo, thì mình sẽ thấy đây là cái phát triển chung của dân tộc mình, của Phật giáo. Cái gắn bó này là máu thịt keo sơn như thế, cho nên cái phát triển, cho nên những lúc dân tộc gặp khó khăn, Phật giáo cũng gặp khó khăn. Những khi dân tộc phát triển thì Phật giáo cũng phát triển theo, và cho đến ngày hôm nay thì mình đang làm cái công chuyện đó, tức là dân tộc đang hội nhập, đang phát triển thì Phật giáo cũng hội nhập và phát triển cùng với dân tộc. Ở đây cái này là cái điểm mới trong thời đại chúng ta, và chúng ta vươn tới để hội nhập với thế giới và xứng đáng với dân tộc chúng ta, với Phật giáo chúng ta.
The Lai Tran dynasty marked a high point in Vietnamese history, wherein Buddhism was essentially the third leg of the nation. Then, in the Hao Le dynasty, monks began secluding themselves, disengaging from politics and culture. With the growth and prosperity of monasteries, the Sangha became degraded with corrupt monks, and people gradually lost faith in the Sangha. At the same time, the government reduced its support of Buddhism due to political troubles, while other wars occurred. Contemporaneously, intellectuals began to take refuge in Confucianism. They took its ideas as vehicles to protect and rebuild the country. Thus have we examined a sampling of historical causes that gave shape to Buddhism and ultimately weakened it externally and internally. The country likewise suffered from this degradation.